Hey guys, welcome back. Tonight, close your eyes and journey with me back 4,000 years to the cradle of civilization, Ancient Mesopotamia. Beneath the flicker of oil lamps and the hum of the desert wind, men once spent their entire lives doing something so simple, so repetitive, it became the heartbeat of history itself. They were the scribes, the quiet architects of memory, pressing tiny wedge-shaped marks into soft clay, hour after hour, day after day. No glory, no audience, just rhythm, patience, and peace. What began as mind-numbing labor slowly turned into a meditation, a forgotten secret of stillness hidden inside repetition. So tonight, as the world fades and your breath begins to slow, let the rhythm of their ancient hands guide you toward calm. Let the dust of Mesopotamia settle around you like a soft blanket of time. So before you get comfortable, take a gentle moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if these deep sleep history stories help you find peace, sleep better, or simply reflect on our shared journey through time. Now, close your eyes and let's return to where writing itself began. Imagine being 7 years old and your parents deciding that your future would be written in clay. Not in words, not in dreams, but in the faint lines of cuneiform pressed into soft mud. You are taken to a place they call the Eduba, the tablet house. It sounds grand, but it isn't. The air smells like wet earth and sweat. The walls are bare. The only sound is the steady tapping of reed pens, tuck, 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 echoing like rain on old stone. Inside, rows of boys sit cross-legged on the floor. Each has a small lump of clay in front of him, still warm from the sun. The teacher walks behind them slowly, his steps deliberate, like a priest moving through a ritual. He carries no whip. He doesn't need one. His silence is enough. On your first day, you're given a single task. Learn one sign. Just one. The sign for grain. A few small wedges arranged carefully, like the marks of a tiny bird's foot. It looks simple, but it is not. The teacher demonstrates once, pressing the reed stylus at an angle, leaving behind perfect marks. Then he nods. Your turn. You copy it once, twice, and then again, until the numbers stop making sense. By midday, your fingers ache, and your lips taste of clay, because when your reed dulls, you are told to sharpen it with your teeth. The sign must be perfect, each wedge deep and clean. If one is crooked, if your hand trembles, the teacher takes your tablet and smashes it on the ground. The sound startles you every time, a dry crack that echoes through the room like breaking bone. You start again, 500 times. Always 500. The repetition dulls everything. The sound of birds outside, the smell of the river, even the thought of going home. All that remains is the clay, the reed, and the endless pattern of wedges and lines. Yet something happens in that monotony. You begin to feel the rhythm,
the way each stroke follows the last, like breathing. The writing becomes a kind of quiet music. Your mind empties, and for a brief moment, there is peace, a strange peace, carved out of exhaustion.
By the second week, you already know how the days will go. Dawn breaks, the clay is laid out to warm in the sun, and the sound of the teacher's footsteps marks the start of another round of repetition. The boys no longer talk. There is nothing to say. Words have become clay themselves, heavy, shapeless, and silent. Each morning begins the same way. The teacher writes a short phrase on a master tablet: 1 cup of dates, 2 measures of barley. I served my master well. Then he says, softly but firmly, write it 100 times. The words hang in the hot air, slow as honey. 100 times, the same 4 or 5 words. It doesn't sound like punishment, but it is. Your fingers grow stiff, your arm aches, and your mind slips somewhere far away. At first you think about home, your mother baking bread, the smell of date syrup, but slowly those images dissolve into the rhythm of scratching clay. The stylus digs, presses, lifts, and digs again. After the 50th time, the phrase no longer means anything. After the 80th, it becomes a kind of music. By the 100th, it becomes nothing at all. Only movement, only breath. The teacher walks between you and the others, his robe brushing against your shoulder. He says nothing. He doesn't have to. You already know that if your wedges are too shallow or your lines uneven, you'll stay after the others leave. Some nights, the classroom is lit by a single oil lamp. The shadows of the boys stretch long across the walls like tired ghosts. Sometimes, in the silence, someone sniffles, not crying exactly, just breathing too sharply. You feel it too, that heaviness behind your eyes, that ache at the back of your throat. But you hold it in, because if the teacher notices, he'll simply hand you another tablet and say, "Begin again." There are moments when you think you might never stop writing, that you'll spend the rest of your life pressing the same marks into clay until your hands forget how to be hands. And yet, beneath the exhaustion, there is a strange calm, a deep, slow patience that grows like roots in dry soil. The clay cools under your fingers. The night air drifts through the window. Somewhere, a dog barks. You realize that the world beyond these walls is still moving, and somehow you're a part of it, even here, even in this endless, quiet repetition. By the 3rd month, your hands no longer belong to you. They move on their own, tracing the same marks they traced yesterday and the day before. The clay changes, the lessons change, but the rhythm never does. You've learned to read now, not just the words carved on tablets, but the quiet pauses between them. You know when a line is made by a tired student, when a wedge is pressed too deep by frustration, when a word trembles with fear, The clay remembers everything. It never lies. Sometimes, when the teacher isn't watching, you look at your own fingers, the ridges of clay packed beneath your nails, the small cracks that sting when you wash your hands. They look old, not like a child's hands anymore, but like something carved out of time. The other boys are the same, thin, quiet, almost ghost-like. When one of them finishes his assignment early, he helps another. No one speaks, but a kind of silent brotherhood forms, made not of friendship, but of endurance. You share glances, sighs, small gestures of patience. You've learned that kindness doesn't always need words. It can live in the space between two broken tablets, in the moment when someone hands you a new lump of clay before you even ask. By evening, the air cools. The lamps flicker, painting gold light across the mud brick walls. The smell of oil and dust mixes with the faint sweetness of baked dates drifting from the nearby courtyard. The teacher stands at the doorway, silent as ever. He watches each of you finish your last line. He doesn't praise, doesn't scold, just nods once, as if to say, "You are beginning to understand." Not the language, not yet, but the stillness that lives inside it. That night, lying on your mat, you close your eyes and still see the symbols glowing behind your eyelids. Tiny wedges, endless rows, like stars etched into the night. You realize you've stopped resisting them. The pain in your wrist, the ache in your back, they're still there, but they no longer feel like punishment. They've become part of something larger, a rhythm, a breath, a way of belonging to the world. You fall asleep thinking of the clay, how it softens with water, hardens with heat, and when fired, endures for thousands of years. Maybe that's the secret your teacher never said aloud, that in learning to shape the clay, you were really learning to shape yourself, to endure, to leave a mark that time can't erase. Somewhere in the darkness, the city hums. The river slides quietly past its banks. The moon hangs over the rooftops, pale and watchful. And in the aduba, the tablets rest, rows and rows of them, sleeping under a blanket of dust. Each one still holding the warmth of the hands that made it. Each one whispering the same silent lesson, that even the most repetitive act can hold meaning, if done with patience. Imagine this. You've survived the training, the endless clay tablets, the aching fingers, the scoldings, the sleepless nights. You are no longer a trembling boy in the aduba. You are now a scribe, a keeper of words, numbers, and the fragile order that holds a city together. But it doesn't feel grand. It feels routine, the kind of routine that seeps into your bones before the sun even rises.
The day begins before dawn. The temple bells ring, distant and hollow, echoing across the sleeping city. The sound drifts through narrow streets, over clay rooftops, and into your small room. You open your eyes before the light reaches the walls. The air is cool, still carrying the scent of river water and last night's ash. You rise quietly, wash your hands in a small basin, and step into your linen robe, stiff, rough, marked with traces of clay dust from the day before. Outside, the horizon glows faintly pink. Birds begin to stir in the palm trees. The city of Ur wakes slowly, not with noise, but with movement. A baker lighting his oven, a potter turning his wheel, a priest preparing incense, and you, a scribe, walking the stone path toward the palace archives, reed pens tucked behind your ear, your tablet basket hanging from one arm. The palace stands silent in the morning haze. Its walls rise like a mountain of baked clay, glowing with the first light of the day. Inside, you can already hear the faint sounds of other scribes arriving, the rustle of papyrus cloth, the soft murmur of greetings, the splash of water as someone wets the clay to keep it workable. Your workspace is small, almost humble. A low table, a pot of clay water, a basket of reeds. Hundreds of blank tablets stacked neatly like waiting hearts, ready to receive words. You sit cross-legged on a woven mat, the smell of damp earth rising from your tools. The first assignment arrives before you've even fully awakened. An overseer places a tablet before you. His voice is calm, impersonal. Inventory of barley, Section A. Begin. You bow your head slightly. The same task you've done countless times, and will do countless times again. The stylus meets the clay with a quiet tap, then another, then another. The pattern begins. It's slow at first, hesitant like the start of a prayer. 1,000 measures of barley, stored in warehouse Section A. Tap, tap. 200 sheep, counted and verified by scribe Naram Sin. Tap. 50 jars of beer, delivered to the temple kitchen. The rhythm grows steady, almost musical. Tap, tap, tap. A chorus of quiet scribes filling the room with the heartbeat of administration. Each wedge mark is deliberate, each stroke measured. The temple depends on these marks. The city's wealth, its taxes, its trades, all live within the clay beneath your fingers. Yet as you write, the words blur, the meaning fades. The rhythm takes over. You no longer write sentences, you write patterns. You no longer count numbers, you count breaths. The tap, tap, tap becomes a mantra. The day stretches long and golden ahead of you, and the work never truly ends.
As the morning deepens, the work grows heavier, not in weight, but in consequence. The lists you write are not just words, they are records of lives. One misplaced wedge, one careless number could decide whether a farmer keeps his harvest or loses it to the temple stores. The palace officials trust the scribes, but they also fear them. In a world without paper or ink, your clay words are law. You feel it in your fingertips, the power and the danger of accuracy. Around you, the other scribes work in silence. You hear the rhythm of their styluses. Tap, tap, tap. 100 small hearts beating in unison. Occasionally, a supervisor passes behind you, his sandals whispering against the floor. He glances at your tablet, nods faintly, then moves on. That single nod means you live another day without error. Your hand cramps, your back tightens, but you do not stop. You dip your fingers into the clay water pot to moisten your palm and keep the surface workable. The clay responds like a living thing. Too dry and it cracks. Too wet and it smudges. You've learned to feel the balance by instinct, as if reading the breath of the earth itself. Sometimes, a gust of wind from the open window stirs the dust and cools your face. You pause, only for a moment, and let your gaze wander. Outside, you can see the courtyard, priests carrying offerings, guards shifting in the heat, merchants unloading sacks of barley. All of them depend on you, though none will ever know your name. The next task is tax records. You receive a new stack of tablets, each stamped with the seal of the temple. The same format, the same care. Farmer Gudea owes 3 measures of barley for his plot of land. Merchant Urnamu must pay 2 silver shekels for his trading permit. Builder Enlil Nessa owes 1 ox for his building contract. Each name carved carefully, each number double-checked. A single mistake could bring punishment not only to you, but to the one whose name is written. The clay carries judgment. It endures longer than memory, longer than stone. Sometimes, as you press the reed into clay, you think of those names: Gudea, Ornamu, Enlil Nessa. You've never met them. You don't know their faces, their families, or their stories. But you know their debts. You know what they owe, when they paid, what they promised. It's strange, you think, to know the burdens of others more intimately than their voices. The repetition dulls the world. Hours slip past unnoticed, marked only by the steady rhythm of your pen. Tap, tap, tap. The clay darkens as it dries, and so does the room, until you can no longer tell whether the sun is high or low. Yet you keep writing, not because you love it, but because you must. The clay will not wait. The temple records will not stop. The city depends on your precision, and the gods, perhaps, are watching. And so you breathe in deeply, you straighten your back, adjust your stylus, and press again. One more line, one more mark, one more breath in the quiet machinery of civilization.
Soothe midday, the light in the archive turns soft and golden. Dust floats through the air like slow snow. The heat outside presses against the clay walls, but inside there is stillness, a rhythm that feels older than language itself. You keep writing. The words are no longer words. They are shapes, patterns, echoes of 1,000 hands that came before yours. Tap, tap, tap. The reed slips into clay, leaves its mark, rises again, like breath, like heartbeat. You've stopped thinking about the meaning of what you write. It doesn't matter whether it's barley or beer, sheep or silver. What matters is the motion, the quiet ceremony of repetition. In this silence, something strange begins to happen. The world narrows, sharpens. You can hear everything, the faint hiss of clay against the stylus, the flutter of a bird beyond the window, the sigh of your own lungs. For a moment, the walls seem to fade, and you feel as though you're floating, not working, not serving, just being. The overseer passes by again. He pauses, watches your hand move with mechanical grace, and says softly, "Steady." It's not praise, it's permission. Permission to continue existing within the rhythm. You nod without looking up. The stylus continues its dance, each mark identical, each line born from patience rather than thought. The other scribes around you are the same, bent, silent, absorbed. Together you look like a forest of statues, alive only through motion. By late afternoon, the rhythm changes. Fatigue sets in, but it's a familiar companion now, a gentle ache that reminds you you're still human. You stretch your fingers. The clay beneath your nails has hardened into tiny ridges. You lift your head for the first time in hours. The sunlight has shifted. It falls across the floor in long amber bands. The scent of wet clay mixes with the faint sweetness of dates being baked somewhere nearby. For a moment, you allow yourself to imagine the outside world. Children playing near the riverbank, merchants shouting prices, the hum of a life you rarely touch. But then, almost naturally, your gaze returns to the tablet. It's not duty anymore, it's gravity. The clay calls you back. As twilight approaches, the room glows dimly. The lamps are lit, their flames small and steady. The scribes begin to finish their final tablets of the day. You smooth the surface of yours with the palm of your hand, inspecting each line, each wedge. It's perfect, not because it's beautiful, but because it's precise. You sign it with your seal, a simple cylinder engraved with your name, roll it once over the clay, and hand it to the overseer. He nods once again. When you step outside, the air is cool and smells of dust and evening bread. The city hums quietly. The sky above turns deep blue, the first stars trembling awake. You walk home through narrow streets, your hands still tingling from the day's rhythm. The marks you made today will dry by morning, then be placed into the temple vaults, stacked with thousands of others, records that will outlive every person whose name they bear. Perhaps one day, long after you're gone, someone will find one of your tablets. They'll run their fingers over your marks and wonder who you were. A man, they'll say, who wrote what he was told. But in truth, you were more than that. You were the pulse, that kept a civilization breathing, one wedge at a time.
Before you could write a single word, there was the ritual. Quiet, careful, patient. It began not with thought, but with touch. You would kneel by your low table, the faint smell of earth rising around you. The tablet before you was nothing yet, just a lump of river clay, soft and cool, waiting to become a vessel of meaning. You pressed your palms against it, feeling the moisture push back gently, like skin breathing. The balance had to be perfect, not too wet, not too dry. If the clay was too damp, your marks would blur. Too dry, and it would crumble. So you kneaded it, slowly like bread, folding and pressing, until the surface felt alive. The sound was faint but steady, the soft squish of clay, the rhythm of your breath, the faint crackle of fire from the nearby lamp. Outside, the night hummed with quiet life, the drip of water from a distant gutter, the rustle of palms in the breeze. But in your little room, the world had narrowed to your hands and the earth between them. You shaped the clay into a rectangle, trimming the edges with a wooden blade. Each side had to be even, each corner precise. Then you took a smooth stone, polished from years of use, and ran it across the surface, flattening it into perfection. The motion was circular, hypnotic. Press, glide, breathe, until the surface gleamed faintly in the lamplight. This was not just preparation, it was meditation. The more you worked, the quieter your thoughts became, until you felt yourself dissolving into the clay. Then came the tools. Your reed pen was no ordinary stock. You had chosen it yourself from the marshes where the reeds grew tall and silver in the wind. You had cut it at a perfect angle, 45 degrees, then sharpened its edge with a flint blade until it sang against your thumb. You tested it on a scrap piece of clay, pressing it gently, turning the wrist slightly. The wedge came out clean, deep enough to last, but not too deep to split the surface. That was the secret. Precision without force, control disguised as ease. When the surface was ready, you lifted your stylus and let it hover over the clay. A small pause, the silence before creation. In that moment, the air felt heavier, as though time itself were waiting. Then you pressed. One mark, just one. The clay yielded, obedient and soft, holding the first sign like a memory being born. You exhaled slowly. It was enough. The act itself, the press, the angle, the release, carried a peace that words could not describe. Before long, you would lose yourself in the rhythm. Press, turn, press, turn. Each wedge connected to the next, forming patterns that seemed to hum under your fingertips. And though the work was slow, the world beyond your walls disappeared. There was no city, no temple, no king, only the clay, the stylus, and the sound of your own breathing.
Once the clay was ready, the air seemed to shift.
The light from the oil lamp flickered softly, and the scent of burning sesame oil mingled with the faint dampness of the earth. You took a slow breath, steadying your hands. The reed stylus rested between your fingers like an old companion, light, familiar, shaped by habit and devotion. And then you began. The first mark broke the silence like a whisper. Tap. The second followed, deeper, firmer. Tap. Soon the rhythm emerged. Tap, tap, tap. Gentle, deliberate, patient. It was the sound of centuries, the language of order carved into earth. The wedges were small but alive, pressed at perfect angles, each one carrying the weight of meaning you no longer needed to understand. What mattered was the motion, the pressure, the release, the pause in between. You found that rhythm again, the one every scribe discovered eventually, the one that turned writing into breathing. You pressed, rotated, pressed again. The reed made a soft, wet sound as it met the clay. Tick, tack, tick, tack. A heartbeat slowed by time. The lines formed patterns. The patterns formed words. But to you, they were more than symbols. They were meditation. Around you, the world blurred. The flame danced. Shadows bent and stretched across the table, following your hand. You could hear other scribes too, their rhythms faint but steady, echoing through the quiet hall like a low chorus. Each of you working alone, yet together, bound by the same sacred motion. Some wrote faster, their rhythm sharper, like rainfall. Others slower, more deliberate, like the pulse of a drum heard through walls. But all of it, every stroke, every mark, breathed with life. At times the reed would crack, a small, crisp sound that broke your trance. You'd pause, examine the splintered edge under the lamplight. Then, wordlessly, you'd pick up a knife, trim the reed, cut a new point, test it once, twice, and return to the rhythm. There was no frustration in it, only acceptance. The reed was mortal too. It lived, broke, and was reborn with every sharpening. The act of fixing it became part of the ritual, a reminder that creation and fragility were twins. Hours slipped away unnoticed. The room grew warmer, the clay under your fingers cooled. The oil in the lamp hissed softly, whispering that the night was growing old. You looked at your tablet. Lines of perfect, patient wedges gleamed faintly under the golden light. You had written hundreds of signs, but you couldn't recall a single word. It didn't matter. What you sought was not meaning, it was balance. And for a few moments, in that still air filled with the scent of clay and smoke, you found it. The rhythm was all that remained. The tap of the stylus, the steady breath, the slow, eternal heartbeat of civilization, written, quite literally, into the earth.
As the night stretches long, you begin to feel something deeper beneath the rhythm. a quiet pulse that doesn't belong only to you. The clay under your fingers feels warm now, alive. Each wedge mark you press seems to breathe back, as if the earth itself is remembering what it means to be spoken to. You realize that this act of pressing thought into matter is more than writing. It is communion. The tablet becomes not just a surface, but a heartbeat, steady, enduring, eternal. You press once. The reed sighs, and a small sound fills the air. Tick. It's soft, yet it echoes, invisible but infinite. Another mark follows, and another, until you lose track of where your hand ends and the clay begins. There is no separation anymore. You are not creating, you are translating, from silence to form, from breath to permanence. And in that rhythm, you glimpse something close to peace. The flame flickers. Shadows ripple across your hands, across the tablet, across time. You think of the scribes before you, men long gone, whose hands once moved like yours, whose breath once fogged the same air. Their marks still exist somewhere, sleeping under layers of dust and centuries, their lines still sharp, their meanings perhaps forgotten, but their rhythm intact. You realize that you too are joining them, one more hand in an endless lineage of quiet endurance. The thought humbles you, softens you. It makes every motion feel sacred. You pause and look at your tablet. Hundreds of signs fill the surface, arranged in perfect symmetry. To anyone else, they are just numbers, records, contracts. But to you, they are proof, not of power, but of presence. You existed here. You pressed your breath into the clay. You left something that might outlive the river, the city, even the gods. You wonder if immortality has always been this simple, not in victory or glory, but in repetition, in doing one thing well enough that it remains. Outside, the night deepens. The stars above shimmer like tiny wedges of light scattered across heaven's own tablet. You listen to the city's faint heartbeat, the distant bark of a dog, the sigh of wind over rooftops, the hush of sleeping souls. Everything feels slower, older, endless. You press another mark, and another, and another. The rhythm steadies you. It's not work anymore, it's prayer. Each wedge an offering, each pause a breath of gratitude. You realize slowly that you've stopped counting time. The hours have dissolved into the clay. What remains is only movement. The lamp flickers lower. You sit back, your fingers stiff, your eyes heavy. On the table before you rests your finished tablet, silent, perfect, glimmering faintly with the sheen of sweat and devotion.
You run your thumb over the last wedge and feel a strange calm. It's as if the earth itself is thanking you for shaping it, for giving it a voice, for reminding it that memory still matters. You place the tablet gently beside the others. Together, they will dry by dawn, then be carried to the temple archives, where they'll sleep for millennia. You blow out the lamp. Darkness folds around you like a blanket. The air still smells of clay and smoke. You close your eyes. The rhythm lingers in your pulse. Tap, tap, tap. The eternal breath of clay still alive within you. And in that quiet, you finally rest. Not from exhaustion, but from belonging.
There comes a point, after years of repetition, when the work no longer feels like work. The sound of the reed pressing into clay, once harsh, once tedious, begins to sound like breath. The motion, once mechanical, becomes graceful, unhurried, almost sacred. And somewhere in that silence between strokes, the ancient scribes found something we spend our whole lives chasing: peace. Not the kind of peace that arrives after success, or the one found in escape, but the still grounded peace that grows from doing one thing with complete attention. Imagine it. The same clay, the same desk, the same task, repeated day after day. The body moves without thought. The fingers remember every motion. The breath syncs with the rhythm. And slowly, the chatter of the mind, all the noise about yesterday's failures, tomorrow's fears, fades. There is no past, no future, no rush, only the present and the clay waiting beneath your hand. The act of writing becomes more than record-keeping. It becomes a kind of surrender, a letting go of the self, of ego, of ambition, of the restless search for meaning. The reed meets the clay gives way, and the world simplifies into three things: pressure, angle, rhythm. Over and over, a language of patience. They say time slowed for them, that when they worked, they no longer noticed the hours. The sun would move across the sky, the oil in the lamp would shrink, but the mind stayed still, suspended between one wedge and the next. It was, in its own quiet way, enlightenment. Not through fasting or prayer or sacred vision, but through the humble repetition of a simple act, done 1,000 times until it became truth. Some nights, when the air grew cool and the city outside slept, a scribe would sit alone at his table. The fire crackled softly. His hands moved slowly, gracefully. The marks he made were ordinary: lists of grain, jars of oil, names of merchants. Yet within those lines, he drifted into something wordless, a stillness that asked for nothing and gave everything. In that state, he was not serving the king, or the temple, or even the gods. He was serving the moment.
The clay did not judge. It simply received. Perhaps that's what peace truly is. Not a place we arrive, but a rhythm we remember. A rhythm we can return to again and again until even silence feels full. The ancient scribes found it not in freedom, but in discipline, not in escape, but in presence.
Repetition was not their punishment. It was their doorway. The ancient scribes learned over countless days and endless nights that monotony was not the enemy of the mind. It was its teacher. Every morning they would return to the same seat, the same smell of clay and lamp oil, the same cold tablet waiting in silence. And yet something within them changed each time. What they once called boredom became familiarity, and familiarity became peace. Like a river smoothing its own stones, the rhythm of their work polished away everything unnecessary, pride, impatience, distraction, until only stillness remained. Imagine sitting in that dim light, hours stretching into hours, your hand repeating the same careful motion again and again. The first few strokes demand effort, focus. You think about posture, precision, the sharpness of your reed. But slowly, that thinking fades. The body takes over. The hand knows where to go. The mind loosens its grip. The act becomes effortless, not because it's easy, but because it no longer belongs to you. The repetition has absorbed you. The self that struggles, compares, and complains dissolves into motion. What remains is pure doing, the kind of doing that carries no desire for result, just the movement, the breath, the soft whisper of reed against clay. Many of them spoke of this state in their writings, though rarely in grand words. They called it shulmu, peace, harmony, completeness. Not a peace achieved, but a peace remembered. It was said that when a scribe entered this flow, his mind mirrored the order of the heavens, unbroken, circular, infinite. He became in that quiet room a reflection of the universe's own patience. The irony was beautiful. They spent their lives writing for kings, merchants, priests, people of noise and ambition, yet found their own salvation in silence and repetition. They copied lists no one would ever read, recorded names that would soon fade, and yet those moments were alive with meaning. They had discovered what philosophers millennia later would call mindfulness, the art of being wholly where you are, even when the world demands you be elsewhere. And perhaps that's what made their legacy endure. They didn't resist monotony, they befriended it. They didn't chase newness, they refined what already was. In that endless act of pressing wedge into clay, they discovered the rhythm that holds all things together. The rhythm of breath, the rhythm of heart, the rhythm of time itself. Sometimes, when the wind from the river blew through the open window, scattering dust across the table, a scribe would pause. He'd lift his head, watch the motes dance in the sunlight, and smile. Because he knew the dust would settle again. The work would continue, the clay would wait, and the peace, that quiet, steady peace, would always be there, waiting for him to return.
There is a moment, a quiet, invisible moment, when repetition becomes freedom. The ancient scribes called it the still flow, a paradox, a state where movement and stillness merge into one. It arrives not through effort, but through surrender. One morning, a scribe might sit at his table, the same table he has known for 30 years, and realize that his hands have begun to move without him. The reed dips, turns, presses. The clay receives, soft and patient. He no longer writes, he is written through. What once was discipline has become instinct, and instinct has become peace. This flow was not loud nor glorious. It didn't bring fame or wealth or even comfort, but it brought something rarer, a life lived entirely within the present. Every sound mattered. Every breath was full. Every touch of reed to clay was a conversation with eternity. The monotony that others feared had become a quiet cathedral where the mind could rest. Each stroke of the stylus was like the tolling of a distant bell, marking not time passing, but awareness deepening. When asked what kept them from madness, the scribes would smile. Madness, they said, came from wanting the world to be different. Peace came from accepting it as it was, slow, imperfect, and endlessly repeating. They had learned to see the divine in the ordinary, to feel gratitude not for what was new, but for what simply was. The clay was never exciting, but it was constant. The writing was never easy, but it was honest. In a world that worshipped progress, they had mastered presence. Sometimes, as dusk fell, a scribe would pause mid-sentence, his eyes unfocused, his hands hovering above the tablet. Outside, the air shimmered with gold, the river carrying its quiet light through the city's heart. He would sit there, unmoving, unthinking, and realize that the same rhythm he used to carve symbols into clay was the rhythm of life itself, the inhale and exhale, the giving and receiving, the pressing and releasing, the eternal dance of effort and ease. And maybe that's why their tablets still speak thousands of years later, not because of what they say. Those lists of grain, taxes, debts, and names have long lost their meaning, but because of how they were written, with patience, with presence, with the same steady rhythm that carries all living things. Each wedge pressed into clay was a heartbeat, each pause between strokes a breath, each tablet a silent meditation left behind by hands that had learned to be still. So tonight, as you listen to this, think of them, sitting in the half-light, the soft hum of their breathing mixing with the wind, their minds empty yet awake. They found peace not by escaping their lives, but by entering them completely. They didn't fight the monotony, they became it. And through that surrender, they found something unbreakable. The clay cooled, the lamps dimmed, the city slept, but their rhythm remained, echoing softly across time. Press, release, breathe.
peace was never hidden. It was simply waiting in the rhythm of the quiet.
4,000 years. And yet, the human mind hasn't changed as much as we think. Tonight, as the rain hums softly outside your window, imagine this: a temple courtyard in ancient Mesopotamia. The air thick with the scent of wet earth, and a lone scribe sitting at his table, his hands moving slowly, rhythmically, pressing reed into clay. Each mark, each stroke, a heartbeat in time. He doesn't know it, but his body is performing one of the oldest forms of meditation known to humankind. Modern neuroscience has a name for what the scribes found in that repetition: the rest and digest response. It's the opposite of the stress reaction, the fight or flight mode that so many of us live in every day. When the scribes pressed their stylus into clay hour after hour, they weren't just making records, they were calming their nervous systems. Their breathing slowed, their heart rate softened, their muscles loosened. In that still rhythm, their brains began to hum at a slower frequency, one we now associate with deep relaxation, even sleep. Science tells us that repetitive rhythmic actions like writing, weaving, painting, or even folding clothes activate the parasympathetic nervous system, the part of us that says, "You're safe now, you can rest." It's the same feeling you get when you knit a scarf, walk along the shore, or watch waves roll in and out. Time stretches, thoughts quiet, the self becomes smaller, softer, easier to carry. That was the scribe's gift, the quiet discovery that peace doesn't come from doing nothing. It comes from doing one thing, slowly, with care. They didn't know the words neural regulation or dopamine balance, but they knew the feeling, that invisible shift inside the body when tension melts and the mind drifts. Their clay tablets became their therapy, the reed pen their breath, the rhythm their anchor. The world outside was loud: wars, markets, the rise and fall of kings. But inside the tablet house, there was only the sound of focus. Tap, press, breathe, over and over, until the noise faded, until all that remained was motion and calm. And perhaps this is why their practice still speaks to us. Because beneath our glowing screens and constant notifications, we're not that different. Our minds still crave rhythm. Our bodies still long for predictable motion. We find it in the way we stir our coffee, in the shuffle of footsteps on a quiet walk, in the sound of rain against glass. The scribes wrote to survive their chaos. We scroll to escape ours. But somewhere in that ancient rhythm lies a bridge, a whisper that says, "Slow down, be here, feel this moment as it passes. You are safe now, you can rest." The truth is, we are not so different from them. The scribes had their tablets. We have our screens. They shaped clay. We type words. They sought rhythm.
We chase calm, but the need is the same. A place where the mind can rest from its own noise. In the modern world, peace is no longer silence, it's rare. We wake to alarms, scroll through chaos, breathe shallowly between deadlines. We fill our days with motion, but feel hollow inside. Our ancestors, sitting quietly by lamplight, may have known something we've forgotten. That stillness is not the absence of activity, but the presence of rhythm. They didn't stop working to find peace. They found peace through work done slowly, with presence, with care. Neuroscientists today call it flow state, the moment when self-conscious thought dissolves and the body takes over, guided by the gentle rhythm of repetition. It's not magic, it's biology. The same balance of dopamine, serotonin, and endorphins that those ancient scribes unknowingly triggered every time they pressed their reed into clay. You can feel it too, when you wash dishes and the sound of water becomes music, when you sweep the floor and notice how your breath syncs with the motion, when you trace words in a journal and the ink flows like thought made visible. These are not chores. They are small temples of calm, waiting for you to enter. The scribes didn't meditate in the way we imagine monks do. Their meditation was practical. It was built from repetition, from patience, from giving full attention to something ordinary. You can recreate it in your own life. You don't need a temple, or an ancient language, or a clay tablet. You only need a rhythm, the kind that asks nothing more than your presence. Try it. Tomorrow morning, when you make your coffee, move slowly. Listen to the drip. Smell the warmth. Watch the steam curl upward like the breath of the earth. Don't rush. Don't fix anything. Just notice. This is how the scribes worked, not by seeking calm, but by surrendering to it. The body understands what the mind forgets, that peace isn't earned, it's remembered. Each repetitive motion, each steady breath, teaches your nervous system the same lesson those Mesopotamian scribes learned long ago. You are safe now. You can rest. And maybe that's what our modern rituals are missing. We seek escape through speed, through novelty, through endless change. But the scribes remind us that tranquility comes from staying, from doing the same thing again, until the act itself becomes prayer, until every motion, every breath, every heartbeat feels like home.
Tonight, as the rain whispers against your window, Imagine borrowing a fragment of their peace. You don't need clay or reed or a temple courtyard. You only need rhythm. Something simple, something slow, something that asks nothing but your presence. The ancient scribes lived surrounded by chaos, empires rising and falling, floods and droughts, kings and wars. Yet within that noise, they carved a private world of stillness. They pressed their thoughts into clay, and in doing so, quieted their own minds. Their work was repetitive, yes, endlessly so. But in that repetition, there was safety, predictability, a rhythm that reminded them that life, though uncertain, could still be shaped one careful mark at a time. Modern science now tells us what they must have felt deep within their bones, that repetition soothes the brain, that predictable motion gives the mind something steady to hold on to. Each time you repeat a gentle movement, folding, brushing, writing, even breathing, your nervous system sends a quiet signal through your body. It's okay. You're home. You're safe. Imagine sitting where they once sat, not as a scholar or a scribe, but as a human being seeking stillness. The world outside rushes by, news, messages, expectations. But here, in this small space, you create your own temple. Maybe it's the way you stir your tea, or the way your fingers trace the same spot on the blanket, or the way your breath finds its own rhythm. These are your modern tablets, your marks upon the clay of the moment. The scribes didn't seek meaning in every stroke. They didn't ask if their work would matter. They trusted it did, because the act itself was sacred. The act of doing one small thing with devotion again and again was enough. And that is their secret. Not productivity, not perfection, but surrender. The gentle art of letting peace find you through the ordinary. Tonight, you can try it too. As you lie there, let your breath follow their rhythm, slow and steady. Inhale, exhale, press, release, tap, pause. Feel your heartbeat matching theirs across 4,000 years of silence. You are not in Babylon or Ur or any temple, but the calm they found is still here, waiting, because the brain that once held their thoughts is the same as yours. The heart that beat beneath their tunic beats in you now. So close your eyes. Let the weight of the day fall away. Let your thoughts settle like dust on still water. And listen. Can you hear it? That quiet rhythm, that ancient calm, echoing faintly through time. It says, you don't need to run anymore. You don't need to fix anything. Just breathe. The scribes pressed their truth into clay. You press yours into air. The medium has changed, but the message endures. Peace is not something to be found. It's something to be remembered, something to return to again and again, until the ordinary becomes holy, until even silence feels alive. And as the rain softens outside,
as the fire hums low. Remember this ancient secret. Repetition is not boredom. It is rhythm. It is safety. It is prayer. The same rhythm that soothed a scribe's weary hands now waits to cradle your restless heart. You are safe. You are home. You can rest now.
It's strange, isn't it? How monotony, the very thing that numbs the body, can awaken the soul. The scribes of Mesopotamia discovered this long before science could explain it. Hour after hour, they copied the same lists, drew the same symbols, pressed the same lines into clay, and somewhere in that repetition, something began to stir. Their hands worked, but their minds drifted beyond the walls of the tablet house. They entered a different kind of silence, one not empty, but fertile. A silence where stories began to bloom. You can almost picture it. A young scribe, his fingers stained with clay, writing out the daily accounts, 100 measures of grain, 40 sheep, 12 jars of oil. His body is exhausted, his eyes unfocused, but beneath the haze of routine, a spark flickers. He begins to imagine the lives behind those numbers. Who raised the sheep? Who poured the oil? What gods watched over the harvest? Slowly, the list becomes a story. The numbers turn to names. The transactions become memories. And out of this monotony, creativity rises like mist from warm earth. The scribes didn't set out to be poets, but their stillness, their forced patience, became the soil from which the first literature grew. When the hands repeat a motion long enough, the mind finds freedom within its cage. Freed from the noise of decision, it begins to wander. And in that wandering, it dreams. It was in this quiet wandering that the first great stories were born. Not from kings or prophets, but from weary men sitting at low tables, surrounded by clay and silence. They wrote of floods that cleansed the world, of heroes who defied death, of gods who whispered in dreams. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the world's oldest story, was not written in a burst of divine inspiration. It was pressed, wedge by wedge, into clay by someone who had probably spent his morning copying tax records. The repetition that dulled the senses also sharpened the imagination. Each stroke of the reed, each mark of the wedge, became a heartbeat of thought, rhythmic, steady, endless. The body moved automatically, and in that freedom, the spirit began to play. Creativity, they discovered, wasn't born from chaos. It was born from calm, the quiet rhythm of doing one thing well again and again, opened a door between the mundane and the divine. And maybe that's what true creativity has always been. Not a flash of lightning, but the slow forming of clouds. Not a shout, but a hum. Not a sudden fire, but the long, patient warmth that comes from tending something small. The scribes, without knowing, had created the first creative practice. Their monotony was their meditation. Their meditation became art. Their hands were never still, yet their minds were endlessly free. That was the paradox of the scribe, a worker bound by routine, yet liberated by it.
While their fingers pressed symbols into clay, their thoughts wandered far beyond the tablet's edge. They moved between two worlds, one of repetition, one of imagination. The clay grounded them, the stories lifted them. A scribe could spend his morning copying a contract for the temple. 3 shekels of silver for 1 ox. But while his hands followed the familiar rhythm, his mind would drift elsewhere. Perhaps to a market stall where lovers met in secret. Perhaps to a god's temple shimmering in the dawn. Perhaps to a storm that once drowned the world. The act of writing freed him from the weight of thinking, and in that strange release, creativity began to take root. They didn't have notebooks for ideas or lamps lit for inspiration. The ideas simply lived inside them, quiet but patient, waiting. Each stroke of the stylus carved not just symbols, but silence, and in that silence, images gathered. The scrape of reed against clay became the rhythm of thought. The press of hand became the measure of emotion. And when night fell, some of those same scribes would write for themselves, small poems, fragments of dreams, hymns to gods that felt like friends. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the oldest surviving story, wasn't the work of one man, but of generations of scribes who carried its verses in their minds like sacred seeds. Each one added a word, a detail, a rhythm. The flood that swallowed the earth, the friendship that defied death, the grief that taught kings to be mortal, all of it lived through them, men who spent their days counting grain, but their nights dreaming of gods and stars. Their monotony became their muse. The very thing that should have dulled them instead deepened them, because in repetition there is safety, and in safety the imagination blooms. They discovered that when the hands are busy, the mind becomes still enough to listen, and in that stillness, the whispers of creativity emerge, gentle, steady, patient. The stories that would shape civilization began not in shouts of passion, but in the quiet hum of routine. Think of it. The first stories were not shouted into existence. They were written, slowly, carefully, reverently. The scribes didn't rush. They didn't chase inspiration. They simply allowed it to visit, like a bird landing on an open palm. Their clay tablets were heavy, but their minds were weightless, and through them, the dreams of humanity found form. The flood, the hero, the gods, the stars, all carved by hands that never stopped moving, guided by hearts that never stopped dreaming.
In the end, every mark pressed into clay was more than just a record. It was a bridge, a fragile bridge connecting duty to dream, noise to silence, the visible world to the invisible one that lived inside the human heart. The scribes may never have called themselves artists, but in their repetition they carved the first pulse of art itself. Each wedge mark was a breath. Each tablet a heartbeat, each completed list a small act of creation disguised as work. They didn't know it, but they were building humanity's memory one impression at a time. The clay preserved not just numbers, but emotion, the faint tremor of a tired hand, the hesitation of thought, the care of a mind trying to be perfect. And because clay endures, so did they. The fingerprints of a student still visible after 4,000 years tell us something profound, that what begins in monotony can end in immortality. The monotony that the world once pitied, the endless repetition, the same motions, the same symbols, became the rhythm through which culture was born. From those repetitive hands came hymns to gods, songs of loss, poems of love, and laws that built nations. They wrote of floods and kings, of guilt and grace, of dreams that reach beyond death. And all of it began with a simple wedge pressed into clay. Think of that for a moment. The act of pressing down slowly, gently into something soft to make it remember. Isn't that what all of us are still doing? We press our thoughts into paper, into screens, into hearts, hoping something will last. The tools have changed, but the rhythm hasn't. The reed has become the pen has become the keyboard, but the movement, the human impulse to capture life in marks remains the same. Maybe that's why the scribes still speak to us. They remind us that even the most ordinary act can be sacred, that repetition done with presence becomes prayer, that patience practiced long enough becomes peace, and that creation, real creation, doesn't come from chasing inspiration, but from showing up again and again until the ordinary becomes divine. Tonight, as you listen, you are part of that same rhythm. You are tracing the same arc that began in a clay room under a Mesopotamian dawn. The flicker of your breath matches the flicker of their oil lamp. The stillness in your mind is the same stillness they found after the 1,000th repetition. The story continues, not in clay, but in your quiet heartbeat. Sleep now, knowing that the same peace they found, you can find too. For in the gentle rhythm of your breathing, in the patience of your stillness, in the quiet of this moment, you are also writing something eternal. Not in words, but in calm. Not in clay, but in time.
Somewhere in the cradle of civilization, in a quiet corner of a temple archive, a man named Namu begins his day. The sun has barely touched the ziggurat walls, and the air still carries the cool breath of dawn. The room smells faintly of clay and oil lamps. Outside, the city murmurs to life. Merchants shouting, donkeys braying, sandals brushing against dust. But inside, there is only stillness. The kind of stillness that feels alive. Namu has done this for 10 years. Every morning he takes a small block of clay, kneads it gently, and flattens it into a perfect rectangle. His hands know exactly how much pressure to use. His fingers don't tremble anymore. The reed pen, cut at the same angle he's always used, rests between his fingers like an extension of his breath.
The moment the pen touches the clay, the world fades. He begins with the sign for man, 3 wedge marks angled just so. The first press sinks in deeply, the second lighter, the third exact. He does not think. He does not plan. His body remembers what his mind has long since released. Each motion flows into the next with the effortless grace of a ritual practiced beyond thought. Outside, time moves fast. Inside, it dissolves. Hours pass unnoticed. The temple bells ring for midday, and Ur-Nammu hasn't looked up once. He doesn't need to. In the quiet rhythm of his work, there is no need for clocks or commands. The clay tells him when to pause, when to press, when to breathe. His muscles move with precision, his breathing slow and steady, his awareness narrowed to a single wedge mark at a time. This, though he doesn't know the word for it, is meditation. Not in the way of monks or mystics, but in the quiet surrender of repetition. The work is not the prison, it's the doorway. Through it, he enters the simplest, purest form of peace. Not the peace of rest, but the peace of focus. The calm that comes when the mind no longer struggles to be elsewhere. His teacher once told him that the gods love order, that every perfect tablet was an offering. But after a decade, Ur-Nammu suspects something else. Perhaps the gods don't need the tablets at all. Perhaps the act itself, the steady movement, the careful breath, the quiet dedication is the prayer. If someone were to watch him now, they might think he looks bored. But look closer and you'd see something different. A subtle rhythm, almost musical in the way he presses each line. A faint smile resting on his face, not of joy, but of surrender. The same kind of smile you might see on a craftsman polishing wood, or a gardener pulling weeds in perfect silence. The tablet before him begins to fill with signs, but the signs are no longer just symbols. They are his heartbeat arranged in clay. He's not chasing meaning anymore. He's living inside it. And in that moment, somewhere between the sound of breath and the soft tap of reed on clay, Ur-Nammu becomes weightless.
What Ur-Nammu entered was not merely concentration. It was a state that modern science would one day name flow, a paradox of focus and freedom, where the mind is neither tense nor idle, but balanced perfectly between challenge and ease. In this quiet dance between effort and surrender, the scribe found a peace deeper than sleep, sharper than thought. The brain, if one could have measured it, would have shown a rhythm, a steady pulse of synchronized waves, neither hurried nor slow. The body followed a script so familiar that the conscious mind stepped aside, allowing a gentler intelligence to take over. It was no longer Ur-Nammu who wrote. It was writing itself that moved through him. Every wedge mark became a heartbeat, every line of clay a breath.
He was no longer aware of himself as a man separate from his task. The pen and the hand and the mind and the motion, all dissolved into one continuous rhythm. To modern neuroscientists, this would be the brain's optimal state, the prefrontal cortex, where doubt and decision live, quietly dimming its light, making space for timeless awareness. But to Ur-Nammu, it simply felt like belonging. The kind of belonging that needs no words, no reason. The clay responded to him like water taking the shape of a vessel. Each press left a small hollow, each hollow held a thought, and together they formed a world. The steady repetition of pressing and lifting, began to sound like waves on a quiet shore, a rhythm that lulled the mind into surrender. He no longer worried if his work pleased his superiors or whether his lines were perfect. The perfection had already become him. As the hours slipped by, the sound of the reed pen tapping against the clay grew hypnotic, soft, patient, alive. The distant noises of the temple faded away. The outside world no longer intruded. What remained was breath, motion, and silence. And in that silence, something remarkable happened. Thought disappeared, yet awareness deepened. The scribe didn't think of gods, but somehow felt closer to them. To reach this state took years of monotony, years of what others would call boredom. But boredom, in truth, is only the door that patience opens. When the mind no longer fights to escape, it begins to see. The repetition, the predictability, the endless copying, all of it, over time, became not a burden, but a blessing. In its endless sameness, the world simplified. Nothing left to chase, nothing left to fear, nothing left to prove. Only clay, only breath, only now. And perhaps that is what the ancients understood better than we do. That peace is not found in escaping repetition, but in meeting it completely. That stillness doesn't mean doing nothing. It means doing one thing wholly until time itself forgets to move. Ur-Nammu didn't seek enlightenment. He found it by accident, buried under the weight of 10,000 tablets, carved one breath at a time. By the 10th year of his service, Ur-Nammu no longer needed to remind himself what each sign meant. The symbols were no longer external things. They had become part of his body, like the pattern of his heartbeat or the cadence of his breath. The repetition that once felt heavy now flowed through him like air. His fingers moved without thought. His breath fell into rhythm with the faint tapping of the stylus, and the clay yielded to him like an old friend. Every day began the same. Every day ended the same. And yet, inside that sameness, something grew, a quiet expansion, invisible but undeniable. The repetition did not confine him, it freed him. For while the body moved in circles, the spirit moved forward. The deeper he entered the rhythm, the less he needed to escape it. Modern psychology would call this the healing power of rhythm, the way predictable patterns calm the nervous system, teaching the brain that it is safe. The ancient scribes didn't need words for it. They simply lived it. In the quiet symmetry of their labor, their bodies told the mind, "You are home." And the mind, hearing this, finally let go of its need to fight. There is a holiness in repetition that modern life often forgets. We are told that meaning comes from change, from movement, from novelty. But the scribes knew another truth, that meaning also lives in stillness, in returning to the same act again and again until it stops being effort and becomes essence. Their days were all alike, but no two moments of awareness were ever the same. Each press of the reed was a small surrender, a soft reminder. Peace isn't found by doing less, it's found by doing with presence. The temple bells would ring, marking another sunset, and Urnammu would look up at last. His back ached, his hands were streaked with clay, but in his chest there was only calm, the kind that doesn't need to be named. As he washed his hands in the cool basin of water, the ripples mirrored his thoughts, expanding outward, fading, then gone. Tomorrow he would return. The same seat, the same tools, the same clay. But he no longer feared the sameness. It was his prayer, his path, his proof that peace doesn't need to be found. It can be practiced. Perhaps that's the final lesson of the scribes, that through the sacred rhythm of repetition, the human heart learns how to stay here, to stay calm, to stay alive in the smallness of the moment. For repetition, when done with reverence, is not monotony, it's devotion. And tonight, as you listen, your breath too becomes that devotion. The steady rhythm of inhale and exhale, the pulse behind each word. It is the same rhythm that guided Urnammu's hands 4,000 years ago. The same rhythm that has carried every human being who ever found peace not in doing more, but in doing one simple thing, completely. So breathe now, softly, deeply. Let the sound of your breath become the sound of the reed against clay. Let the world fade away and rest in that ancient silence where the mind is empty and the soul perfectly still.
Now, as you lie here, somewhere between wakefulness and dream, imagine the distant world of the scribes fading softly into the darkness behind your eyelids. The warmth of their oil lamps, the scent of clay, the quiet rhythm of the reed against the tablet, all of it drifting closer until it feels as though you are sitting beside them in that ancient silence. The secret they discovered thousands of years ago wasn't about words or clay or even work. It was about rhythm. The steady, repeating rhythm that draws the mind away from chaos and toward calm. Every press of the stylus was a breath. Every line on the clay, a heartbeat. Each repetition, a step away from the noise of thought toward peace. Modern science has another name for it now: the parasympathetic response, a state where your nervous system remembers how to rest. When you focus on something repetitive, a pattern, a sound, a breath, your brain begins to believe you are safe. The storm quiets, the pulse slows, muscles release. The body whispers to itself, "It's time to rest." The ancient scribes didn't need neuroscience to tell them this. They felt it. They lived it. In the slow rhythm of their work, they found the stillness that most of us spend a lifetime chasing. While others fought wars, traded wealth, or worshipped the gods with fire, the scribes worshipped through patience, through the art of quiet repetition. Their prayer was not spoken aloud, but pressed into clay, one symbol at a time. And so, as you rest here tonight, you are not so different from them. Your thoughts are your clay, soft and unshaped. Your breath is your stylus, pressing gently again and again. You do not have to control it. You only have to let the rhythm guide you. In and out. In and out. Each breath a small offering to peace. The scribes taught us, though they never meant to, that peace is not found in escape, but in presence, in the patient act of doing one small thing completely. They found their sanctuary not by fleeing the world, but by repeating it until it softened, until the noise dissolved into silence. And you can find that same sanctuary right here in this breath. Let your mind settle like clay resting on a table. Let your thoughts drift slowly downward like dust in a quiet room. And when the next breath comes, let it carry away whatever remains of the day, the worries, the lists, the noise, until what's left is only you and the rhythm and the silence that has always waited beneath everything.
Listen closely now to your own breath, the rise and fall of your chest, the quiet sound of air moving through your throat. It is older than any word, older than language itself. It is the same rhythm that moved through Ur-Nammu as he worked by the dim light of the temple lamp 4,000 years ago. He didn't call it meditation. He didn't seek peace. He simply breathed, and in that breathing found the world become quiet. The scribes understood something we often forget, that the act of breathing is not just survival. It is participation, a conversation between body and universe. Each inhale draws in the calm of the world. Each exhale releases the weight of it. When Ur-Nammu pressed his stylus into the clay, his breath matched the motion. In for the press, out for the lift. The body and the earth in rhythm. The sound of reed against clay was not noise. It was heartbeat. It was life remembering itself. You can feel it too. As you lie here now, imagine your breath as the reed. Each inhale, a gentle press into the clay of this moment. Each exhale, a soft lifting away. You don't need to force it. The rhythm already knows what to do. It has known for thousands of years, long before your mind began to wander, long before your day filled with noise. You are returning to a rhythm older than thought, older than time. Modern scientists speak of slow breathing lowering cortisol, calming the vagus nerve, easing the heart into stillness. But the ancients knew it without needing the words. They learned by living. They breathed in rhythm with the fields, the rivers, the sky. Their bodies listened to the same tempo as the stars, the slow, patient pulse of existence. There's something humbling about realizing that your breath connects you not just to yourself, but to everyone who ever lived. Each exhale you release tonight echoes those who came before you, the farmers who sowed in silence, the builders who lifted stone, the scribes who wrote until the clay hardened. Each inhale you take is the same air they once breathed under the Mesopotamian dawn. You are not separate from history. You are breathing it. So let yourself drift into that ancient rhythm. Feel the weight of the day dissolve into the steady cycle of air. Inhale slowly. Let your ribs open like the petals of a flower. Exhale gently. Let the air slide away, leaving you a little lighter. Nothing to fix, nothing to prove, just breath. Old as stone, soft as sleep. Somewhere deep within, your body remembers this. It remembers the rhythm of repetition, the calm of steady motion, the peace of presence. And as you keep breathing, as the air flows in and out, you'll begin to notice what the scribes once felt. That peace isn't something you must earn. It's something you return to. It was always there, waiting beneath the noise.
Imagine now the last flicker of the oil lamp in Ur-Nammu's chamber. The clay tablets are done for the day. The air smells of dust, ink, and quiet. He stretches his hands, the same hands that pressed meaning into earth, and leans back against the cool wall. Outside, the city hums, faint sounds of distant water, soft voices fading into night. But inside, there is only the warmth of completion. The mind is empty. The breath is slow. The day dissolves into stillness. Ur-Nammu doesn't think about tomorrow's lists or the mistakes he might have made. He doesn't plan. He doesn't recall. He simply lets the weight of the day fall from his shoulders as gently as dust leaving the air. The clay will dry by morning. The world will continue. But for now, he closes his eyes, and the rhythm that once guided his hands now guides his dreams.
you too are part of that rhythm. The same timeless cycle of work and rest, thought and release, breath and silence. When your day ends, it's not an ending. It's the soft closing of a tablet, the pause before the next line. Like Namu, you have written your hours into the clay of time. And now, as he did, you let them go. You cannot edit the past nor predict the future. You can only rest in the soft space between, the now. Science tells us that the body repairs itself in sleep. Muscles knit, hormones balance, the mind reorders the fragments of the day. But there's another truth, quieter and older. Sleep is also remembrance. Each night when you close your eyes, you are not escaping the world. You are rejoining it. The same pulse that moves through stars and waves and ancient hearts moves through you too. Breathe now, as the scribe once did, in and out. Let your breath smooth the rough edges of your thoughts. Let it polish the mind like water polishing stone. With each exhale, feel your body sink deeper into the bed, like clay settling into the earth. There is nothing to solve, nothing to hold, just the rhythm, eternal, patient, kind. And as you drift, imagine the faint glow of a temple lamp flickering somewhere in the dark. Imagine the sound of a reed pen tapping softly against wet clay. Imagine the air thick with quiet purpose and the slow heartbeat of creation echoing across centuries. That sound, gentle, ancient, familiar, is your lullaby. Namu sleeps, the city sleeps, the past itself breathes softly beside you, and soon you too will follow into the same darkness that once held every scribe, every dreamer, every soul who ever sought peace in the steady rhythm of living. So close your eyes. The world is safe. The work is done. The rhythm continues. And somewhere beyond time, the scribes smile, knowing you have joined them in silence, in stillness, in sleep.
And so the story ends, not with an ending, but with a breath. The same breath that once moved through the reed pens of the scribes now moves quietly through you. The clay has long since hardened, the tablets buried beneath millennia of dust, yet the rhythm remains. It hums beneath every heartbeat, every inhale, every moment that slows down enough to listen. 4,000 years have passed since Namu laid down his pen, but in some gentle, invisible way, he never stopped writing. His rhythm became the world's rhythm. The quiet pulse of creation found a new home. In every hand that writes, in every mind that seeks stillness, in every soul that learns to rest without fear. Perhaps that is the secret the ancients wanted to leave behind, that peace was never in the clay, nor in the temple, nor even in the gods. It was in the act itself, the soft pressing of life into the present moment. They wrote not because they sought immortality, but because repetition itself was enough. Each stroke said, "I am here. I exist. This moment matters." And tonight, as the darkness deepens and your body begins to drift, you too are writing, not in clay, but in breath, not for others to read, but for yourself to feel. Each exhale smooths the page of your mind. Each heartbeat leaves an invisible mark that says, "Peace is here." The work of the day has ended. The soul continues its quiet craft, shaping rest, sculpting calm. Somewhere, deep in the silence, the ghosts of the scribes still whisper, not words, not lessons, just rhythm. The same slow, ancient rhythm that carries you now. You do not have to chase it. It has already found you. The clay remembers. The breath remembers. The body remembers. And so, when you finally drift into sleep, you are not falling away. You are returning. Returning to the same stillness that every scribe once found between the sound of reed and clay. Returning to the same peace that has always been waiting, patient, timeless, gentle. The peace that writes itself across the dark. Rest now. The lamps are out. The wind is soft. The last page of the story is blank. And that's exactly how it's meant to be.